Yeah, thank you for your kind introduction. It's my pleasure to be here to share my ideas and insights for the new strategy for new drug development. I'm very happy here. Before starting my main talk, I'd like to express my sincere thanks to Professor Howard Lee of Seoul National University. While I prepared this presentation, Howard Lee and myself have several meetings through online, and we discussed a lot about the new insight and new ideas about the post-corona era. And I adopted many ideas from him about the insight and new perspectives of new drug development. So then I'll start my first presentation. During a discussion and during a survey of a post-COVID-19 era, we found the 6 major characteristics of a post-corona era. The first one is increased funding in the infectious disease R&D. As you can see, until the 2019, the funding for the infectious disease is not so big. It's just a normal spendings and normal fundings for the research and development of infectious disease. But after the COVID-19 era, then it was increased a lot. As you can see, 2000 to 2019, average $5 billion was funded for the infectious disease, but 2021, 16.8, almost $17 billion was funded, NIH only. So you can imagine how much fund was invested into the infectious disease. As you can see, infectious disease is not a lucrative business area in terms of pharmaceutical industry. Infectious disease is just a short-term treatment. It is save lives or die. But in contrast with the other drugs, for example, hypertension or diabetes, then it takes a long time to have a medication. So in this reason, the pharmaceutical company would like to develop and sell the product of hypertension and the diabetes drugs rather than infectious disease. So in this sense, until 2019, very small fund was invested into this area, but the COVID-19 changed all the scenarios of investment. Then this is another good example, good evidence of infectious disease is a very getting importance. For example, 2019, therapeutic area distributions, only 9% of pipeline covers infectious disease. But 2020 or 2021, then it was increased to 13%. So it's just a 4% point increase, but this is a total number of pipelines in this area, so it's quite big. Then, in contrast with the infectious disease, oncology drugs, 41% proportions of oncology is 41% in the past. But after COVID-19 era, oncology proportion decreased into 34%. It's a big decrease. I think you can imagine the oncology is a very important area of therapeutic area, but difficulties of clinical trials. So that's the reason the investment on oncology drug is decreased quite a lot. But anyway, the infectious disease is increased 4% point. It's quite a huge number of pipelines increase. And the second characteristic is public-private collaborations. As today, we are talking about the open innovations. The the most important point of open innovation is public-private collaborations. The most critical collaborations in this area is NIH and many pharmaceutical companies. For example, the clinical trials initiated by NIH AID is active 1 through active 6. The 6 clinical trials was ongoing. So during these clinical trials, 20 biopharma companies are involved in these clinical trials, and they provided, the pharmaceutical company provided their drugs, and NIH initiated these trials to find out which drugs are most effective for the COVID-19 treatment. During these trials, we found many drugs are useful and many drugs are useless. The typical example is remdesivir. Active 3 is a good example. Remdesivir was, we have found that remdesivir is quite effective for the COVID-19 patient. And another one is, as you can see, the active 1 protocols. Active 1 protocols, we found that JAK inhibitors, for example, Olumiant is a trade name. This baricitinib is very effective for the patient, moderate to severe patient. So it got an approval from the US FDA, and currently the RA patient, the rheumatoid arthritis patient, has suffered from another shortage of baricitinib. We didn't anticipate it in the past. So baricitinib is very rare drugs at this moment. The shortage happened, so in worldwide. So RA patient has suffering from another type of disease or the supplies problems at this moment. Anyway, this active protocol contributed a lot to treat the COVID-19. So it's a good example of public-private collaborations for the treatment. And second is a public-private collaboration. Good example is, as you can see, Mrna and BioNTech, Quebec. The vaccine development is a typical example of a good collaboration between a public and private collaboration. The first one is Mrna in the United States. United States government, BARDA and NIH invested a lot of money to Mrna. For example, 2.5 billion federal funds was poured to Mrna, plus government-led clinical trials happened. For example, NIH, especially NIAID, did the clinical trials of Mrna in the States and other countries. So you got an approval from the US FDA and EMA, even the WHO's approvals. So it's a good example. The second one is BioNTech. BioNTech chose a partner, Pfizer, as a partners of their development, but the government of German government invested 375 euros for the milestone-based investment to the development of BioNTech. But the United States government would like to invest the money to Pfizer, but Pfizer refused to get some financial support from the government. So German government only invested this money to BioNTech. BioNTech is the original developers of messenger RNA vaccines named Comirnaty. So total 375 million euros was invested to BioNTech. There's a federal funds of a German government. The third example is Quebec. Quebec also the German company United States would like to invest the money to cure back, but the German government decided to invest instead of United States government. So 300 million euros was invested to cure back. And that's 23% shares was owned by a German government. And also 252 million euros was invested to cure back. So it's a good example of the mRNA vaccine development. The United States, the NIH and Moderna, and in Europe, the German government invested in BioNTech and the CureVac to develop messenger RNA vaccines. The same thing happened in Korea. Korean government would like to develop our own Korean version of COVID-19 vaccines. For example, mRNA vaccines or subunit of protein vaccines and some kind of vaccines. The Korean government invested a lot of money to many companies. At this moment, 8 companies get government fund to develop the vaccines. But the most advanced one is SK Bioscience. They have developed the subunit protein vaccines. In the later session of my presentation, I will tell about the details of SK Bioscience, the vaccines. But anyway, they are doing a clinical trials, phase 3 in Korea and other countries, 4 countries. So at the time, the Korean government support that kind of protein-based vaccines a lot. It's a general trend in the world, especially US and German government and UK government, as well as Korean government. So public-private collaboration is getting more important. So we have to fight against the pandemic. The private-public collaboration is very much important. Everybody knew about that at this time. The third one is expanded private collaborations. In addition to the public-private partnership, private collaboration is very much important. It's a good example. The first one is Comirnaty, the Pfizer and BioNTech. And second is Sanofi and GSK, protein vaccines. Sanofi developed protein-based vaccines, and GSK provided the adjuvant. AS03 is a good adjuvant and very famous adjuvant for the vaccines. So 2 companies are collaboration to develop protein-based vaccines at this moment. And GBP 510 is the SK Bioscience and the University of Washington. University of Washington, the Institute of Antigen Research, provided the antigen of these vaccines. This is some kind of a nano-based subunit of protein antigens. Then bioscience has a full authority to develop these vaccines, and GSK also decided to supply adjuvant AS03. Everything was conducted based upon the support from CEPI. CEPI is a global coalition to fight against the pandemic. So CEPI support the SK Bioscience and GSK and University of Washington. It's a good example of private collaboration plus global collaborations, and global coalitions also did an important role to create this type of coalitions. And Moderna NIH is not private. It's a private to a private-public partnership. Anyway, mRNA 1273 was developed, and we got many the benefit from these vaccines at this time. The last one, not the least, last one is, as you know, very famous AstraZeneca vaccines. originally it was developed by University of Oxford, Jenner Institute of Vaccines, University of Oxford, and AstraZeneca has a strong relationship and a strong collaboration between two entities. University of Oxford developed these vaccines and provide the technologies to AstraZeneca. AstraZeneca would take over the development and clinical trials and manufacturing. So that's the reason it's a good example of a private collaborations. If University of Oxford is a private the entities. Anyway, the number 3, expanded private collaboration is very much important. It's some kind of open innovation to work together and make research collaborations to create new weapon to fight against the pandemic. And fourth characteristics of post-corona COVID era, AI became a very important tool for us. Early in the pandemic, many drug developers took drug repositioning as a strategy to develop COVID-19 therapeutics quickly. But the result is not so clear. Lopinavir, hydroxychloroquine, napamostat, ivermectin, apixaban, niclosamide, many parasiticide was developed and to change the repurposing drugs, but no clear-cut result was delivered yet. But the pharma companies found that this is a good example. Took different approach to repositioning strategy in order to build a system that accelerates the hit finding process. Autodoc Vina is a good software, and COVAX is another good example. The most important and most famous example is a Benevolent AI. Is the name of the company who utilize the AI as the tool to develop new drugs. They found that JAK inhibitors as a promising candidate for COVID-19 treatment. The deal is Olumiant is a trade name of that drugs. Proved efficacy via Act 2 trials, as I already mentioned. The NIH initiated these trials. The Olumiant have shown the efficacy to the mild, the moderate to severe patients. So it got obtained the EUA from the US FDA and the widely used to treat moderate to severe range patient of COVID-19 at this moment. Fifth major characteristic is the beginning of mRNA era. This is the main topic of today. mRNA vaccines have shown their efficacy to fight against the COVID-19. So many companies, at this moment, 2 companies have gotten approval of US FDA and EMA to fight against COVID-19. And many of clinical trial items was ongoing at this moment. So as you can see, many mRNA vaccines clinical trials was under development at this time. So many mRNA vaccines and mRNA anti-cancer product was appeared in this time. And the 2030, we can see in many anti-cancer drugs. So it's a current proportion of mRNA treatment. 35% is for COVID-19. It's not the same as we can imagine. Only 1/3 of mRNA treatment was for COVID-19. HIV is a 24%. The rabies is 8%, Zika virus, influenza, many other the infectious disease was treated by the mRNA vaccines. So it showed in the future we will have a strong weapon to fight against many infectious diseases. And the last one is a wide acceptance of telehealth, the remote treatment. Then it will eventually went to the decentralized clinical trials. So clinical trial investigators predict that a threefold increase in remote patient interactions will persist after the pandemic. During the pandemic, it's very difficult to meet the patient of clinical trials. But during this pandemic, we understand, we accept that the remote meeting and remote therapies are possible. So we increase this capability to the clinical trials. So-called decentralized clinical trials are possible. So it's a huge changes. The most important changes is simultaneously multinational clinical trials are possible. So this will change the whole industries very rapidly. So we have to prepare. The Korean community of clinical trials should prepare this type of big changes. Then this is a conclusion. So now we understand the importance of infectious disease. The second is a year of RNA. I dare to say that the 2021 is the start of a year of RNA. Then number three is nowadays we are at the stage of opening window for the gene therapy. The main topic of our conference today is gene therapy and biotherapies. Gene therapy. So far, the most difficult challenges for the gene therapy was gene delivery. Regulatory authorities suspect and worry about the safety concerns of a delivery system. For example, the antivirus or adenovirus or lipid nanoparticle make a big the safety concerns. So that's a worry of the regulatory bodies. But from now on, they could not say just like that, because more than 2 billion people got inoculated, vaccinated by mRNA vaccines, but didn't show very small the adverse events. So the regulatory bodies didn't say, general speaking, they should point out that very specific areas. But it's not so easy for the regulatory bodies to refuse. So in that sense, nowadays, in the United States, only two therapies was sold in the marketplace, approved, Zolgensma from Novartis. So the other one is Luxturna. Two therapies are gotten approval from US FDA, but sooner or later we can see more than 10. Sooner or later we can see more than 100 the therapies of gene therapy. So it showed good remedy for the rare disease in the future. Zolgensma is a good example to treat SMA at this time, but it will expand their areas to other rare disease and orphan drugs. So in this sense, we at this moment we have been suffering from COVID-19, but it showed the good, the hope for the futures, the gene therapies and telemedicines, and so everything has a two aspect. One is a dark side, and different one is a bright side. So from now on, at this moment, we should focus on the bright side of the Corona-19 era. So thank you for attention. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.